And our first post is self-anchoring.
So, in a sentence, this is the tendency for people to, when modeling another mind, basically use your mind and put yourself in their shoes, right?
Yes.
As best you can.
Yeah.
Which Eliezer's day job is making minds from scratch, so that's not a good base spot for him. But for most of us, almost all of our interactions, it's not a bad place to be.
Yeah.
It's kind of the best. It's also the best we have.
Yeah, there's not really any other way, I think. Like, you know what your own mind is like. You don't know what other people's minds are like. You can guess. I've often wondered, though, like, if there was some way to telepathically just link yourself to some other mind, would it be just wildly different from the way your mind works and thinks? Or would it be, like, pretty comfortable?
I have two predictions. One, we will be able to do that in the next 50 years.
Can't wait.
And two, we will not be, like, bowled over by how different other people's brains are. I think that they will be similar enough to ours to at least be recognizable.
I think it's going to be a matter of culture. Like, the more similarly you were raised, but to other people in the same general like area and milieu, they're going to be very similar, even if you have wildly different opinions. But like people on the other side of the globe, raised in a totally different culture and different circumstances, I think might be like radically different.
My prediction would be that, like, I think just sort of the average person will probably feel pretty similar to the average person, but I bet there's going to be crazy outliers there. Just based on some people I know who I like most people, once I talk to them for a bit, I can start to model them and predict sort of the kinds of things that they might want to talk about, what they might say next, you know. There's some people I've met, though, that, like, I was talking about sort of that there's a ex-boyfriend of a friend of mine and Phoenix's who I was just like, we spent like a week hanging out with these two, and I could not predict what this guy was going to do or say next, and it actually kind of bothered me. Like,
yeah, that's scary. You don't want humans that you can't predict.
Unpredictable people. Yeah.
I think I would have a hard time. Like, I've met some super hippie people, like the kind that you think about only show up in movies and stuff, right? And I just have a hard time really grokking what being them must be like. Like, it almost feels like a different neuroarchitecture.
Okay, then I will refine my prediction to say that it'll be easier to relate to those people than it will be to your pet dog.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, so that's a way broader, maybe less refined prediction. But like, I think that for the most part, our modeling of other people based on our own selves is going to be close enough most of the time, right? And it's because we all do basically have the same neural architecture. Yeah. Like I said, it might be interesting seeing the order of which thoughts appear from people in different cultures, right?
Yeah.
You know, like the first thing might be like, oh wait, what about my culture? What about my family? What about my community? Whereas other people might be like, wait, what about me? What about my personal safety?
Americans. What about my freedom?
Well, and I wasn't even elevating one over the other. I was just like,
yeah, no, I get you.
But yeah, totally. Some people would be, but my freedoms, and other people would be, but my family's reputation or something, right?
Mm-hmm. But that's just differences in what you value. I guess what's important to you.
Yeah, so like those thoughts, I think will then cascade to like the rest of the decision, of how to go about the rest of the conversation or solve the problem. But maybe the real fun thing will be, like Jay said, people at the tips of the at the tips of the distributions, right? Mm-hmm. Like if I'm mind melding with an M, with an emulation of like Elon Musk's brain, right?
See, I don't think Elon Musk's brain would be that hard to figure out. I think he's mostly someone who's very curious, very energetic, and very healthy. And like, that's not that hard for me to model.
I think he's also neuroatypical, which would be interesting to engage with as well. As he said during his SNL monologue, he's the first person with Asperger's to host, or at least the first person with Asperger's to admit it.
Right.
He was actually really funny. Did I already rave about that?
You did, but not on mic.
Oh yeah, it was awesome. SNL does this thing where they can bring on really great people, and then like the show kind of sucks. I think the week before him was Keegan-Michael Key.
Oh,
that episode sucked.
Really?
They didn't put him in any good sketches.
Well, that sucks.
And so like that's really what makes or breaks it.
One of the first episodes that had Jim Carrey on it was fucking amazing because you could tell like he jumped into every episode and was just putting his comedic genius to work, and it was great. I would have thought that he would have done the same thing.
I would have thought so too. It was one of the worst episodes of the season.
Damn.
It might, I don't know, be like sort of a matter of how outgoing the actual comic is. Like a lot of comedians are actually pretty introverted.
But even Keegan, he's got a long background in sketch comedy.
Yeah.
And then the season finale was I can't remember her name. the Queen's Gambit actress.
Okay.
Hers was amazing, and I wouldn't think of her as a comedic like mastermind, but it was hilarious. It was a great episode. Anyway, modeling other minds is tight, and this is basically that. Talks about between ages of 3 and 4 people, human people.
I think we talked about this last episode, right? The whole theory of mind developing about at it, like between age 3 and 4, where kids are able to kind of put themselves in the shoes of another kid that they're watching on TV. Like,
this is
what does Sally think is in the box? Pencils or candy? Because like, you saw her see candy be put in the box, and then she left, and someone came and replaced it with pencils, and then Sally comes back, and then they ask the kid, what does she think is in there? Before they get a good theory of mind, they'll say, well, obviously pencils, because that's what's in the box. But it's like, once you realize, no, wait, she wasn't in the room when they switched it out, that's kind of that self-reflective bit that aware bit, that more sapient.
That most people learn at age 3 or 4, but some people, I think, never seem to quite get.
It's a really short post. I think the key thing from this post is that two people see basically the same layout, but one of them can see 3 candles, and the other one has the smallest candle blocked, so they can't see it. And the person who can't see the smallest candle tells the other subject to move the small candle from one place to another. And the person who can see all 3 candles and sees there's one even smaller, their eyes always go first to the smallest candle before they quickly adjust to the medium-sized candle, which they know is the smallest one the other person can see. And that's not the test. Like, the test is obviously, if you aren't a 4-year-old, you know the other person can't see the smallest candle, so you're going to move the medium one. But what Eliezer says is the interesting thing is, reflexively, they always go to the smallest candle first and then adjust, which means that everyone has a bit of anchoring. We spoke about anchoring before, like several months ago at this point, where if you're given a high number just at random, you will anchor on that higher number and give higher estimates for things that you have absolutely no idea about just because you were already primed with a higher number. And so he says this is an example of like all people anchor on themselves first and then adjust afterwards. And due to the nature of anchoring, it's very rare for people to adjust enough.
It makes sense because we literally don't know what other people's brains are like. So we do kind of have to start with, you need some model. Here's the one that I'm familiar with. Yeah. And then, then I'll add like a sort of simulation of the other person's brain state based on the facts that I've known about them, the ways that I've seen them interact, etc.
Yeah. I think anchoring has some of the replication issues, but this doesn't strike me as the same kind of anchoring. And if anything, this might just also...
I think that's actually priming, and that's like in the social sciences, the whole like, if you give a group of men and women a math test and prime it by like, men do better on this test than supposedly women do worse, I think that did not replicate.
Oh, this is actually one of the things I did a small version of when I was doing boring psych studies in college. Stereotype threat.
Right.
Was that example. I mean, the other like some weird priming is like, hey, my screensaver is money, and you see like a dollar bill, you're less inclined to give money or something. Like all those sound the eye roll is appropriate. Mm-hmm. These were like, oh look, it's really easy to prime people on certain things and get certain reactions, but that turned out to not really be the case.
It sounds like just an overly simplistic way of thinking about humans. Like we actually are pretty sophisticated at doing this for the most part.
Did we mention what one of the easiest ways to predict if something is going to replicate or not is?
If it just smells like bullshit?
Yeah. It was basically, if you ask a random subset of people, does this smell like bullshit? And the majority of them say yes, it probably won't replicate. It was a very high correlation.
Wisdom of crowds.
Yeah, I think that for social science, that definitely sounds true, right?
Yeah.
The average person, if they didn't teach evolution, if you ask them, are you related to bananas? They would say, what the fuck are you talking about?
Right.
But
this brings us to the next post already. But yeah.
Right, yeah. but with social science, we all have some intuition of social science.
And we all have a lot of experience with other humans.
Right.
I think is part of the thing that helps with that. Whereas very few people have experience with evolution.
Right. That's not to say that, like, you can't get a surprising finding that, no, actually, it turns out, forget what you thought you knew. This is actually the way people's brains work.
Yeah.
But I was going to mention...
less common, I think, than people trying to generate sensationalist articles.
Right. I was wondering, too, with this one. I mean, so my eyes, I'm told, move the smallest candle to the next to the truck in this little experiment, right? There's pictures in the article. I don't know how much it is that I'm modeling so I look at the smallest candle first. That's the finding, right? Mm-hmm. And then I adjust. I'm like, oh, wait, no, the smallest candle the director can see. Yeah. But I don't know how much that is of like me anchoring or me just like he said smallest candle and just look for the smallest candle, right?
Right.
And then,
okay.
so I would want other ways to test this.
I think that's arguably just anchoring on your own perception there. Like, it's kind of the same thing. Like, you
Yeah.
could say, I'm first jumping to, I, Steven, believe that this is the smallest candle. Or you could just, like, hear them say the word smallest candle and then,
Start scanning for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
but
think
still, that's your brain.
Yeah, I think the key thing here is how it interacts with anchoring from before. Whereas once you're anchored to something, you're going to be always systematically slightly biased towards the thing you were anchored. So everyone's going to have a little bit of bias towards everyone else, thinking that they're more like them more like themselves than they really are.
Yeah. It ends with a nice quote that I like. We can put our feet in other minds' shoes, but we keep our own socks on. This actually ties well into the next post, expecting short inferential distances, which
It's
is
almost like he laid them out in this order on purpose.
I know. This is one of the ones that I never forgot.
Yeah, this is a fantastic one.
Yeah.
And there is an audio version of this. I believe it was Why We Cur that paid me to make an audio version of it. So
Delightful.
everyone can hear that.
Yeah, if you want to hear Inuyasha's voice.
Who doesn't? Yeah, I mean, on a meta note, this is like one of my favorites, and I think it comes up for me like basically daily.
Really?
I mean, at least a few times a week.
I mean, I'm assuming largely in the workplace.
Largely in the workplace, but even like outside of that, any conversation with somebody who, like my wife isn't super into all this rationalist stuff, and so when I come home from doing these, she's like, "Oh, so what'd you guys talk about?" And I have to like think of where to start, and it's fun, it's great, and I think that if people pay attention to like their own interactions with people when they're explaining stuff, I think they'll find themselves noticing this more often. I'm guessing.
Okay.
But
actually, like, there's some autistic people that are super bad at this, and it's really cute. I was hanging out with Gray yesterday, and there were a bunch of times where Gray would just start talking about rifles and like bullet calibers and things, like excited, like, "Oh yeah, well there's this thing," and I was just like, "I have no idea what you're talking about, man." go back to explaining Guns 101, and then we'll go from there.
So first you get a metal tube, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, that's not a bad place to start. I still don't know. I mean, I know that higher caliber means either bigger bullet or faster bullet. I think those two things probably correlate. But I don't know. I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is the kind of thing that if you're so the point of the post is when you're entrenched with knowledge on something and you're explaining it to somebody else, it's not impossible, but you have to be very, very careful and work hard to actually convey what you're talking about successfully.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about it on terms you understand, but they don't understand the terms.
Can we give the hunter-gatherer background? Because
Yeah.
I find it super interesting. He points out
Ego
that
psych.
yes, that in the evolutionary environment, we lived in bands of at most 200 people with no writing. And so all knowledge was passed down by speech and memory. And so any knowledge that wasn't explicitly private knowledge that you were not sharing for whatever reasons you have was just public knowledge, period. There were no like domains of specialization or wherever. And so at most, anyone was ever one inferential step away from you. Like if you had knowledge of where an oasis was, you could just tell someone that. You wouldn't have to explain the concept of an oasis to them first, or the concept of standing water or something.
Right.
Whereas now we have vast differences between what people know that often take, I don't want to say many years of research because that seems like an exaggeration. Sometimes
No, I think it's not. I mean, if you have a degree in, I don't know, if you have a doctorate and you're trying to explain, I don't know,
I agree, but I don't think
a
any
thing that
doctorate...
I just forgot the word of, autophagy, for example.
Bless you.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any doctorate in the world where you literally need multiple years to get it.
You need, I think, maybe not the like 8 or 10 or a million years that we require in the US per se, but like there's definitely
Some things are really hard and take a lot of time to learn.
Yeah.
I agree, but I think that if someone actually really cared about conveying knowledge well and quickly, they could teach one other person in less than 24 months anything that we know, as long as that the subject was, intellectually capable of grasping it. I don't think you need 8 years to learn this shit, and it's convenient, and we teach a lot of other things as well, which is why it can take so long. But if you really wanted to teach someone one specific domain of knowledge, you could cover everything quickly.
Maybe a specific fact. I wonder, if I had Richard Feynman's undivided time for 2 years, could he teach me everything he knew?
About physics?
Yeah.
I think so.
I don't know. I think you could give me
I
a
don't
good
know if I
introduction to
can
everything he
grasp some
knows.
of the high level math, honestly.
Right. If you can't grasp with math, then that's an issue.
Well, but I presumably could with enough time. I'd need 2 more years for that, right? I think that's where the multiple, like, I mean, I see the point you're making, that some stuff might not take literal, 4,000 hours of dedicated time to learn, but it might take, a couple thousand.
I mean, you can put in 10 hours a day, and any reasonable person could, 6 days a week. That's 60 hours a week that you can put into learning something.
Easy, Elon. Most of us are way lazier than that.
Yeah, and it's
If you're motivated, you could totally do 60 hours a week.
I think
see,
it's the
therein
difference.
lies the rub.
Yeah, I think this is the difference here between like you're out getting drinks with your friends and you're like, oh, I just did this cool paper on myelination with my,
Right, yeah.
mentor at work, and then like if your audience probably doesn't want 24 months
No.
of knowledge about this. They're like, okay, so what's like the basic version of this? And then it's actually kind of hard to figure out like
Yeah.
where to start and
It's
how much
certainly-
to simplify it, and also sort of gauge how much they care. Like that's again another fun autistic thing is like I love hanging out with other rationalists because I almost never run into somebody who's just like, oh, I don't care, just give me the short version.
Yeah.
Like that's fun.
I mean, it's certainly not something you can do in a few hours or even a few weeks. So there can be great leaps of inferential distance that just make things impossible to explain to any reasonable audience. Like I got way off on a tangent where like someone really dedicated and interested in something could learn something. Whereas what we're talking about right here is just general conveying information to other people that you know casually.
If I'm writing a book or a paper or giving a talk and I only have an hour for the talk or something, how much do I need to cover before I can get to my point? That's where this comes in, right? It's I don't have the audience's attention for 4,000 hours. I only have them for 1. So
Yeah.
how many steps do I need to cover before I can get there?
Yeah.
There's a good actually example of this in Sam Harris's latest episode. He had Neil deGrasse Tyson on, and Tyson co-authored a new book called Cosmic Queries, which for longtime listeners of Star Talk Radio, his podcast, they'll recognize that that's a section of the show. And it's kind of like XKCD what if questions.
Cool.
Harris remarked that this book felt amazing. It was geared for somebody without a science background.
Yeah,
And,
Tyson's really good at, I mean, I guess that's why they picked him to be the new Carl Sagan, but like conveying complicated topics to a lay audience in a way that's not just like going over your head, but also like not intimidating, or like some people, I don't know, like also just don't want to hear about stuff because they don't want to feel like they're being talked down to. I think they actually address that in the Expecting Short Inferential Distances.
Yeah.
Where at the end, I think like Eliezer was like, you definitely better not tell people how many inferential steps you're going back in order to explain a thing to them, because then they'll get mad.
Both
What, you think I'm stupid? I can't understand this. They like, well, no, you don't understand it.
both Tyson and Sagan were famously into the marijuana. Maybe they both think, how do I explain this to me after I've had a few joints?
Could be. I didn't know Tyson was famously into it.
Isn't he? I think he's talked about it a few times on talk shows.
I don't follow him too closely, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Okay. I mean, maybe I'm mixing him up with someone else, but I wouldn't think I am because
find
it's
that
Tyson.
Marijuana makes me better at empathy. Like, it makes me less stuck in my own head. So I think that it's easier to both like listen to other people with your full attention and then also kind of think about their perspective while you're trying to talk to them. Maybe that's just me, or maybe that's a more common experience.
I think that's basically it, and that's basically what you get on MDMA.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's an empathogen, right?
Yeah, I almost never use marijuana recreationally. I use it mostly to sleep. But what's fun is take it like a couple hours before bed, and then you go take a shower. And I've got a shower speaker to like listen to music. Because being left alone with my own thoughts, forget that, even for a 10-minute shower. So.
Oh, shit.
Oh, I use Aqua Notes. They're like, the waterproof little notepads, and I have just a bunch of them stuck around in my shower to record shower thoughts.
Oh, that's fun.
I actually just come up with a lot of my best ideas in the shower, which is common. But like,
I usually rush through showers now. I'm like, I ain't got time for this, and so I don't have a lot of brain power to devote to thinking about things.
It's like, it's weird because it's not even brain power. It's sort of like, I think it engages the diffuse mode. That's inferential distance thing. Let's see. The brain has the active mode and the diffuse mode. When you're consciously thinking about a thing, you get your best results generally by like crunching on it for a bit and then like going to sleep or playing a video game or taking a shower, and you redirect your conscious thoughts to something else while in the background diffuse mode keeps crunching on the problem, and then like it feels like magic sometimes, where like maybe you'll be stuck on a math problem, you take a nap and you wake up and you're just like, oh, I know what that is. That's so obvious.
Right.
I love that. I at least twice in the last year I've woken up with like a solution to a problem I was working on at work.
Oh, awesome.
And one time was like a week late, and I was like, oh, that's why this didn't work. But
but it just feels like this flash of insight, right? And then it's kind of creepy, but it's actually just the fact that you don't see your brain doing like the mechanisms in the background, but
I just
totally doing it.
Yeah, I just appreciate that it's doing it. But I brought up the Tyson thing real quick because he remarked when Sam said that, he says, I'm glad you said that because that's interesting. My first book that I wrote, I'm quoting Tyson, I wrote for adults, and or maybe I forget what audience he wrote it for. Point is that adults felt like they weren't adult science books if they could understand the whole thing.
Oh.
And that they were like, no, if this is an adult book, there should be some stuff that goes over my head.
Huh.
And so since I can understand this must be for kids.
Wow, that's fucked up.
Well, not necessarily a bad, I don't know if that was like to say, this is a kid's book, forget this, it's not for me, but it must be geared towards a lower audience because I understood it all. Which, yes, that is fucked up in the sense that you shouldn't feel that way about science stuff.
Yeah.
But it was just I knew we were doing this post. I was listening to this podcast yesterday, and I'm like, hey, this ties in perfectly. They're not using the word inferential distance, but they're talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like this trilemma that he brings up about in the ancestral environment. If someone said something with no obvious support, they're either a liar or an idiot. And conversely, if someone says something to you and they don't have, or rather, if you say something to someone that to you is blatantly obvious, but the other person see it, then they're the idiot, or they're being obstinate just to annoy you. And then to top it all off, if someone says something with no obvious support and expects you to believe it, then they must be crazy.
Yeah, you're unlikely to think this person has well-supported background knowledge that no one in my band has even heard of, right?
Yeah.
I feel like this is maybe giving, I mean, like I get, this is a good intuition pump for maybe the way people have experienced this in their own lives, but like this is sort of not giving, I think, hunter-gatherers enough credit. For example, things like creating arrowheads or building fires are actually kind of hard, and often like there would be like the one or two, or I don't know how many people like that are the experts at that thing. People had specialization in things early on, making like the best balanced spears or spear throwers, things like which plants are edible, how to identify them,
tanning leathers, making them into clothes.
Mm-hmm.
This shit's actually pretty hard, and then like it's not even getting into agriculture, which is insanely hard. But like,
I think he softens it for himself by talking pre-agriculture, but your point stands. That,
yeah, maybe he just put it that way, like, oh yeah, those stupid cavemen, like.
Well, those cavemen
not straight up like calling out his audience or whatever, or his specific group of friends.
Yeah, but those cavemen with simpler lifestyles, right? It might be possible as a cave dweller, whatever, 30,000 years ago, to by the time you're an adult or middle-aged or whatever, to know enough to get by, everything that everyone knows. You know how to tan leather, you know how which fruits are safe, all that stuff.
And even if you don't know everything, you're no more than one step away. Like the guy that can nap out arrowheads can be like, you know how some rocks are sharp? And you know how sometimes when you hit two rocks together, one of them will break? Well, if you do it just right, you can make it break so it's sharp in the way you want it to be. Yeah,
you could like, maybe not in one sitting, but like you could apprentice somebody in making arrowheads, and I think most people probably could pick it up. So yeah, anyway.
But yeah, he points out a biologist talking to a physicist can justify evolution by saying it's the simplest explanation. And anyone, well-versed in science knows that is a word of power and it means a lot. Whereas to a layperson saying, but it's the simplest explanation may sound like an interesting factoid, but it's not a knockdown argument because they don't know how powerful of a tool that is.
Well, and I think even one step beyond that, it's not, if you have no take it to somebody who doesn't know what genes are, doesn't know what cells are, and it's like, oh yeah, no, this is the simplest explanation. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? The simplest explanation is that someone made us.
Yeah.
That is a very intuitive and simple sounding explanation.
That's
right?
true, yeah. I've seen people make things before. I can imagine a very big, powerful person making a very complicated thing like a human.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just scoop up some clay.
Right. Then you blow into its nostrils.
You pull a rib out, and then you make a female version.
Because you ran out of clay, so I guess you needed to use a rib instead.
There was a quote that I liked here. A clear argument has to lay out an inferential pathway starting from what the audience already knows or accepts. If you don't recurse far enough, you're just talking to yourself. And that's why I liked the greatest show on earth, Richard Dawkins' evolution tutorial book so much.
Yeah.
I don't think it was till like chapter 4 or 5 where he starts actually talking about evolution.
Oh, cool.
He even says this is getting us close to it, but we're not there yet. We're going to keep daisy chaining on the way to understanding this.
Yeah.
And I think there must be some discussion of cells and genes, but then there was a whole chapter on domestication. It's like, this is something everyone knows because everyone has seen dogs, right? Yeah. And so like that, but we're not domesticating, we do the domestication of dogs, but just imagine nature domesticating them for another purpose. And
actually, dogs domesticated themselves.
Yeah, little column A, little column B, probably. Pugs didn't domesticate themselves.
Being pedantic.
Yeah, no, but yeah, fair point. I was curious if either of you have ever successfully conveyed the idea of inferential distance to somebody outside the rationalist sphere. Double illusion of transparency notwithstanding.
Huh.
Not successfully. I have had unsuccessful attempts. And I do tend to run into the whole like person just sort of being like, oh, you just think you're smarter than me because you've got your fancy degree or you're on the internet all the time or whatever. Like,
yeah, the whole being condescending is a big failure mode.
I keep thinking of my dad,
or
which is like
condescending.
Kind of, I don't know. I feel like I bust on my dad on the show a lot now. If he doesn't listen to it at some point, he's not a dumb person. It's just like a stubborn person, but like he's anti like global warming.
I'm also anti-global warming. We shouldn't do that.
I mean, like,
I know.
I've tried to explain to him one time
the current
that,
temperature.
Men like women with large breasts because of obvious evolutionary things, and he just laughed. It was like,
I just like them because they're pretty.
Nobody's looking at breasts and thinking, oh, like that person would be good at feeding babies. And I was just like, no, they're not thinking it.
You don't need to be thinking it. Yeah.
And then like also money, where like my dad is against the stock market, and he found out that I was investing. He's like, oh man, like you can't be doing that fake money shit. And I was like,
all money is fake.
Do you understand that? Yeah, like all money, like that. This is a piece of cotton that's reinforced with like I don't know what money's made of anymore. You could just say, yeah, it's a piece of paper with like a president's face on it that we've all sort of just like mass hallucinated ourselves into believing has value.
I mean,
you do understand this, right? Like
most money nowadays is just a number in some bank's computer.
Yeah, it's like you cannot eat this though, because like that was my dad's thing, is that there's real money and fake money, and money that is in the stock market is fake money because its value can change. And I was just like, but actual like inflation, Dad.
If we're gonna say real money and fake money, real money is stuff, and it's stuff that people need.
But that's not money. That's just that's wealth.
But yeah, I suppose so. But I'm just thinking like if that's about as real as money can get.
Yeah,
right? And it's like, look.
Things you can trade for
these,
things that people need to survive,
right? Now
but like
I can
money,
barter with you.
Money specifically is like super fungible. It's the whole point of money is that it's abstract. It's not an actual thing.
Totally. Well, and like the other just main virtue of money is that I can transfer like what do you need to live? Food, water, electricity. Well, you have all that stuff, but I need skill of yours. Well, how about I give you, instead of shit you don't need, like stuff, I give you stuff that you can go get stuff that you want with it. Right. And we call that stuff money.
Yeah. How about I give you 10 electricities, which you can later barter for food. Right.
Well, actually, I think that is hilarious. Is my dad is a carpenter, and he does actually barter system stuff a lot. One time he like remodeled a dude's kitchen in exchange for getting dental work.
Oh, that's cool.
So like maybe he's actually just sort of coming from a even further place of inferential distance.
And then neither of them is taxed on that too.
Like,
even though technically they're supposed to declare to the government and be like, here's your money for the thing he did. But yeah, no one does that.
There was one last thing on this post. I don't usually read the comments, but I had time this weekend. And the top comment was really good by user Constant2. The explanation from ancestral environment seems likely. However, there's also a rational argument for refusing to accept a claim unless all steps have been laid out from your own knowledge to the claim. While there are genuine truth seekers who have genuinely found truth and who we therefore ideally While there are people who are genuine truth seekers who have genuinely found truth and who we therefore should ideally believe, nevertheless, a blanket policy of simply taking steps at
taking people at their word.
Thank you. Go ahead and someone else finish that one.
Has the unfortunate side effect of also rendering us vulnerable to humbug. Great word. Because we're not equipped to tell apart humbug from the true statements many steps removed from our knowledge. Which, yeah, was kind of what I was saying about how, like, I feel like we're kind of, like, being mean to hunter-gatherers, because they're actually, yeah.
They knew complex stuff that would take a long time for me to learn, and they weren't just sitting there shitting in their hands and, painting on walls, right? Like, they were doing stuff.
They weren't just doing that.
Yeah. In addition to doing that, they were doing other things.
Right.
But I pulled this one out because say you're looking for a treatment for something and someone's like, oh, what you really need is my really expensive crystal therapy or something. And you're like, no, I'm pretty sure that's bullshit. They could try to, and if they were somehow also versed in rationalist lingo, they'd be like, look, we haven't crossed all the inferential steps that you need to understand this, which is, if that could be true for real stuff too, right?
Yes.
So it's interesting that I think Constant 2 makes a valid point that like rejecting stuff you don't understand.
Yeah. Like if you didn't have any knowledge of, I don't know, you have like gallstones and you're somebody that has just never looked this up, you're fucking busy, and like you get 3 people saying, okay, well, you could take this medicine, or you could do like this therapy or this diet, or you could use these crystals. You'd want the people to each explain, okay, well, why should I do this instead of this other thing?
Right.
And I think that I wish that there was like more respect for the, Neil deGrasse Tysons of the world, the type of person who is actually really good at laying something out and sort of being able to gauge where you are inferentially, what things they need to explain to you, and then catching sort of whether you're confused or not and filling those gaps in. I've definitely seen this. Again, I'm like, the medical profession's on my mind, but there's some doctors that will just talk completely over their patients' heads, or will just do argument for authority, like, oh no, this is what all the papers say is the best treatment, or whatever, versus like, I have a great psychiatrist who's a nerd like me, so the last call I did with my psych just to like discuss how my meds were working, we ended up not even talking about that, where it was just like talking about different like neurotransmitters and new papers that are out and novel therapies and how excited we were about that. But like my psych is the type of person who, if I had questions, I would like trust that she either is going to tell me like what she knows to the best of her knowledge, or she'll be like, you know what, I actually don't know, I'm going to look that up and I'll send you some articles and then my sort of professional evaluation of it, which is great.
Yeah, I was going to mention the opposite of this, which was many people in school had a teacher who had been teaching the same subject for 30 years.
Oh, yeah.
And they're just
reading the textbook to you.
Or they're like, I get, half my class usually gets C's or D's, because this stuff is hard. And it's like, no, you just suck at teaching it.
Yeah.
And you don't remember what it's like to not know this stuff.
You shouldn't be proud of that fact.
It's easy for you to think, oh no, this is actually easy, y'all should understand it, because you've been understanding it for, decades. And they don't remember what it was like to come from that position of ignorance.
Yeah.
So
before we end this, can I take it real quick to culture war land to get a little spicy, but only just for a second? Okay. So
that's where we're going. So
okay, I'd like to occasionally, maybe once every couple months or so, watch videos from partisans on either side that are popular with the peoples, I guess.
Either side of what?
Of the culture war, both people on far left and far right.
Oh, so just
or
like
not far,
morality
but strongly.
things or
not
politics things.
Yeah, politics things. I'm thinking on the right side, the Hodgman twins. They have a cool YouTube thing, and they're very charismatic. They're fun to watch. And there's 2 of them, and one of them is like more extreme than the other, so you can like see this interplay. It's really interesting. But anyways, I see this on both sides where someone will say, I don't even understand how the people on the right think. Yeah. They just must be greedy bastards who believe I got mine. The rest of you can all fuck off and die. They're literally evil. There's no point negotiating with them. And I see the same thing with one of the Hodgman twins. He sometimes says things like, Lefty, you must be brain damaged. Either that or you're just evil. And like he honestly doesn't understand how someone on the left could think and come to the conclusions that they've come to that brings them so far from where he is. And his brother like tries to rein him in. He's like, no, they're not evil. There's like ways you can come to this conclusion. He's like, no, there's no way. It's not possible. And obviously it is. But like people on both sides do it all the time. And I think it's just because there's such a huge inferential distance of if you started out in a certain culture and your culture keeps going in a certain way over many decades and seeing the same kind of
abortion
evidence.
Is murder.
Yeah. It really leads up to a vast difference in the end that you have to go way, way back to bridge that gap.
This will tie really well into basically point 3 that comes up in our main segment here. But in general, if you're explaining away something that, or somebody or some group of people that disagree with you as saying they're just evil or whatever,
stupid or evil,
you don't understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And it's not that you can't because you're not a bad person and only bad people can understand where they're coming from. It's that they don't think they're bad people. Yeah. And it's not because they're woefully misguided. They might be, but they're not so misguided that you can't at least understand where they're coming
Oh
from.
yeah, that's
if you
also a
actually
thing
try.
that I've run into where people, and I've experienced this myself like much earlier on, I think before this became an explicit value of mine, where people don't even want to try to understand where they're coming from because they're worried that they'll get tainted.
Yeah.
That is related also to the main segment.
All right.
So,
Well, then let's finish this up. For next time.
all right. Next time we're doing 3 because one of them is crazy short and
Okay.
basically covered in this one. Explainers shoot high, aim low, double illusion of transparency, and no one knows what science doesn't know.
Excellent.